Oh, it's already recording. That's wonderful. Hi, everybody. This is the PFLAG and Dow team. We are going to get started in just a moment. We want to give everybody time to get situated and get logged in on the various platforms. So give us about a minute and then we will get started.
I love it. I'm starting to see people join in on the chat from Texas, Brazil.
That's wonderful.
I
think we will probably give people one more minute to get logged in and situated, but then we have a lot of content and want to be mindful of the fact that everyone needs to head to their next session after this. So we're going to get started really soon.
Great. And while we're waiting for folks to sign on, if you scroll up to the top of the chat, I wanted to make a slight plug for one of our on-demand summits on Share Your Pride, aligning Pride Month planning to corporate strategy. This is a great one that's very close to the subject that we're talking about here. So if you want to see how Dow has activated volunteerism throughout Pride Month and how we've been able to increase engagement and alignment, be sure to check that out. You'll learn some other things that we're not discussing here today.
Perfect. I think that takes us to a great place. Jean Marie, can you take it away?
Sure, I would be happy to. Welcome everybody to Activating Volunteers from Communities to Corporations. We are really excited that you're here, the PFLAG team and the Dow team. And let me just do a quick introduction as we get started. And Jamie, if you can go to that next slide, please. My name is Jean Marie Navetta. I am the Director of Learning and Inclusion at PFLAG National. My pronouns are she and her, or for those of you speaking Spanish, ella. And I am really excited to be in the background of today's session. Leading today's class are going to be my colleague, Jamie Henkel from PFLAG National. She is our Learning and Inclusion Manager, and our good friend, Trevor Ewers from the Dow Chemical Company, who is a Senior R&D Leader, pronouns he and him. We also have our third colleague up on the screen, just in case you need to reach any of us, Mackenzie Hart. They are not with us in this session, but if you need any assistance, they are always willing to help. And if we go to that next slide, Jamie, I'll do the ground rules and turn it over to you. So a few things to keep in mind today. This is a safe learning space. We want you to ask questions. We want you to interact with us. Please use I statements because we can only speak for ourselves. It's possible we may disagree on something, and that's fine, but let's just make sure that we navigate our disagreements with kindness. We do have limited time today, so if you can keep questions on topic, that's helpful. But if you need something, our emails are available. Our contacts are available also in the Pathable app. So please feel free to reach out to us. And finally, if you can give yourself an hour to be quiet and learn, please do that. You absolutely deserve that. And I am going to be with you in the chat interacting during today's session. So if you need anything, just look for me, Jean Marie Navetta, and I will be able to help. And with that, I'm turning it over to Trevor.
Great, thank you very much. So I wanted to tell you just a little bit about Dow and why I think we're qualified to talk about this subject today. So Dow is a global chemical company with over 35,000 employees spread across the globe. Employee resource groups play a big role in supporting our workforce and align to our company's goals. We have 10 diversity networks driving our inclusive initiatives around the globe, with over 50% of our workforce enrolled as participants and growing. Our LGBTQ ally employee resource group, GLAD, is one of our largest diversity networks with over 5,000 participants and has been an organizational model for our other ERGs due to our robust governance and learning platforms that feed our leadership pipeline and turn our allies to advocates. So if we move to the next slide, telling you a little bit about our governance system. So as a global company, Dow recognize the importance of inclusion, diversity, and equity, and the role it has on all aspects of our business, from recruiting to innovation and sales. ID&E is a key element in Dow's global ambition to become the most innovative, customer-centric, inclusive, and sustainable material science company in the world. So ERG engagement is a foundational component built onto our 3-tier global governance structure, as outlined by the Office of Inclusion. And we rely on the robust engagement of our ERG participants and volunteers to drive initiatives aligned to our 7 foundational pillars of governance, customers, talent, people leadership, suppliers, communities, and reputation. As such, Dow continues to invest heavily in supporting ERG activities through training, financial aid, and leadership support. I&D metrics are embedded in our company's scorecard alongside with our financials and safety results, with leadership accountability directly tied to our annual performance and compensation. So senior leaderships actively engage and align to each of our ERG networks and serve to promote our efforts across our company and how we do business. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to talk a little bit about PFLAG.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Trevor. And this is, again, we want to just sort of establish how PFLAG fits into this conversation about volunteerism. And for those of you who might not be familiar with who PFLAG is, PFLAG was founded in 1973 by the mom of a gay man named Gene Manford. It originally stood for Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, but a couple years ago, almost a decade ago at this point, we legally changed our name to just PFLAG because that spelled out name is not fully inclusive of everyone that we've always served as a part of our mission. And PFLAG at its core has always been a grassroots volunteer-based organization. We have more than 400 chapters that, with 1 or 2 exceptions, are completely volunteer run. And we at the national organization that Jean Marie McKenzie and I are a part of have really centered on providing support and resources and tools for those volunteer chapter leaders. If at any point you or someone that you know is in need of the kind of support that PFLAG is able to provide because a loved one has recently come out, you can find that volunteer chapter that is closest to you by going to pflag.org/find. And if you're joining us from somewhere outside of the United States, there are PFLAG-like groups in many countries across the globe. And you can learn a little bit more about some of those by going to pflag.org/intl family groups to learn more. And, you know, when we think about PFLAG's mission and the PFLAG chapters and the volunteers that are living out that mission, which includes support, education, and advocacy, one of the other things that we have always needed to be very mindful of is that those volunteer leaders, who in a corporation you might think of as you know, employee resource group leaders and sort of serving similar roles, are also individuals who really want to be engaged in their community. They want to provide support in their community. They want to educate their community. They want to do advocacy work in the towns where they live, in the states where they live, in when it comes to federal advocacy. And volunteer leaders are what make PFLAG work. We have volunteers that run individual chapters and serve on board of directors and facilitate support group meetings in person and virtually. We also have volunteers from our network that are involved with the national organization and perhaps provide support to all of the volunteers in their state or in a particular region by serving on our regional directors council. And we have a volunteer-led board of directors. And so I think that helps us to really understand how PFLAG fits into this conversation about volunteerism and sort of the insight that we bring to this conversation. I also want to call out that when we talk about volunteering, whether that is being engaged with an organization like PFLAG or with an employee resource group within our companies, or with community groups where we're perhaps, you know, providing meals or working at a food pantry or those sorts of things, that's big business. About a quarter of American adults reported that they had done volunteer work in the year 2017, which is the last year we were able to find really good data on that. And they contributed nearly 9 billion hours of volunteer time in 2017. On average, those folks spend about 52 hours per year volunteering their time. And if you were to do the sort of dollar-to-dollar assessment of the value of that work for organizations that were receiving that volunteer time, you're looking at about $25 an hour for them. We also know that volunteering has a lot of motivations. 75% of working millennials said they'd volunteer more if they had a better understanding of the impact they were making for the organization or for the community that they were serving. And 35% of respondents in one particular poll said that part of the reason that they like to volunteer is is to socialize. So I wanted to just highlight some of those things so that we have all of these back of mind as we're talking about volunteering within our corporations and within our communities. And to give you a sense of sort of where we're headed for the rest of our time together, the next thing that we're going to do is spend a little bit more time talking about sort of volunteering and how we talk about the concept of volunteering and the impact that that might have on engaging new leaders. We're also going to spend a little bit of time talking about sort of within our organizations, within GLAD and within PFLAG's chapter network, the role that leadership plays in really creating better practices can make volunteering and make longer term volunteer roles more appealing to folks. We're going to talk about how we can build programming to really demonstrate community impact and why that's important. And hopefully we're going to provide you with some tools that'll help you with that work. But before we really get into it, I'm going to turn to Jean Marie to help us with a question that we're going to pose to you all.
So I am looking for people to interact with me in the chat. And here is my question for you. I want you to think about a great volunteering experience that you've had. Now in the chat, tell me one thing that made it so fantastic. And I am seeing people say, if right away, Terry said the people, hey, Terry, the connection, the cause, the people seeing the results, connecting with coworkers I didn't know, it's relatable, building community, making a difference, the smiles on people's faces, the energy, the inspiration, free beer. I'm going to call that one out. Seeing how things work, the impact of connecting, though just seeing people's faces light up, feeling that your time is valued. We are looking at tons and tons of great reasons, and anybody who's reading that chat can read more of them. So thank you very much. But what you can see right away is that people are really looking for connections and ways to see an impact to the work that they are doing. And we are seeing over and over again, people saying that they really enjoy knowing that their time and their contributions help others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that when we think about why people volunteer, it is important for us to remember those really diverse reasons that for some people, we might see that the benefit of volunteering for us as individuals is developing that sense of purpose, connecting to an organization's mission or to the impact that it's having. It's also, for a lot of people, we're talking about sort of having that direct impact, being able to see that the work that I'm doing is transforming someone's situation or the lives of people around me and in my community. For some people, the benefit of volunteering and what's going to motivate them has to do with creating connections to their communities, to other people, and creating those social links and networking opportunities. And I don't know that this came up a ton in the responses we were getting today, but for some people, and especially when we're thinking about ERG leadership roles or longer term community leadership roles, like being on a PFLAG chapter board, it is an opportunity for a lot of folks to deepen their professional development and to develop skills that perhaps they didn't have before. And that can be a key motivator. But there also are some challenges when it comes to volunteering. And I think that when we think about those challenges, we need to ask ourselves some really important questions, like, when we're thinking about volunteer opportunities, when we're talking about those longer term and shorter term opportunities, how are we going to navigate cultural differences? How are we going to make the idea of giving time freely more attractive? How are we going to take those casual volunteers, those folks that maybe show up once a quarter or once a year, and get them into a place where they're considering or even taking on leadership roles? And how do we make this more appealing to everyone? And I'm going to take a deep breath and see, Trevor, is there anything that you wanted to add here?
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of expand a little bit on that why volunteering and how it's important for corporations as well. It also allows you to link personal passions with the business needs and opportunities, which can impact job satisfaction as well as retention within a company. So that's very important. In addition to not only building the skill sets, as Jamie mentioned earlier, it also creates venues to demonstrate skill sets and competencies that might not be available in your current role. So quite important for if you're going for that next job promotion. I know that's one way that I was able to demonstrate people leadership and transition from a scientist to a people leader. And then it also, we've mentioned about the broaden your visibility for career advancements and creating those networks, but it can also provide a unique platform to influence companies' decisions and investments. So maybe within your corporation, you're volunteering because you want to have that voice and want to be able to influence where your company is going. So those are other great reasons why we might engage or choose to be active and should use those as motivators.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I really do appreciate that. And so when we talk about sort of volunteering and leadership, I do think it's important for us to take a look at sort of what's happening underneath, what's happening behind the scenes. And for this, I'm going to turn really quickly over to Jean Marie again for just a moment.
So what I would love to hear is in the chat, once again, tell me how you define volunteering. I'd love to get a couple of responses in there. So I will wait for people to give me their definitions. It's giving your time back. Thank you, Jason. Working without pay, doing the work for free, giving your time or skills about something you're passionate about. A lot of people are saying it is giving my time, sharing my time, doing things for other people. That is the theme that we keep seeing over and over and over again. And that it's about sharing times with others to improve community. Hello, PFLAG Northwest Arkansas. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah. And I think that when we started to think about doing this work together with Dow, one of the things we did is, we went to the dictionary and we looked up how the term volunteer is defined. And you can see here that it's a person who freely offers to take part in an enterprise or undertake a task, or a person who works for an organization without being paid. And I think that that is something that as we think about ERG leadership roles, as we think about community-based volunteering, as we think about really the conversation that we're having today, that is something that we have to be mindful of. And we also need to be mindful of the fact that in some cultures and in some languages, the word volunteer doesn't necessarily exist. That's not how people talk about doing these same types of activities. So I wanted to be mindful of that. And Jean Marie, I'm going to turn it back over to you for one more second.
All right, so I am looking for, and this is a very interesting question, if some people can give me an example of a requirement that you might have for somebody to be able to volunteer for a specific project. So what kind of things? So positive attitude, passion, and commitment we are seeing too. The time, dedication, you need to be available for a specific time frame. You need to have certain levels of knowledge. You need to have certain skills. Somebody said an accountant, a cook, for example, maybe sacrificing some of your PTO. In some cases, there are background checks, especially if you are working with youth. In many cases, you need to have a certain level of health and mobility. In other cases, there is training. So we are willingness to learn. We are seeing a lot of requirements, some of which are sort of soft skill based, but some are very much about abilities that may or may not be present.
Yeah, and you all are like right on it. You're there with us right now, because I think that it's important for us to recognize that when we talk about volunteering, that there are strings involved, and we're asking people to give their time, to give their energy, to give their skills. But there are oftentimes things that, they might need to have a specific level of education for a specific volunteer role. They may need skills or ability or certifications to take on a position like being the budget keeper or the treasurer for an organization. For other people, when we're talking about maybe those single day events or events where people are getting together regularly to do volunteer work, there are also considerations that need to be made, and there are considerations that could prevent some people from being able to participate. Like, is there transportation that's readily available and can get them to and from where they need to be? Is there dependent care that's offered while they're doing volunteer work so that they don't have to find a babysitter for their children or for an elderly loved one that they're caring for? Is there going to be food provided? Is there going to be perhaps stipends offered to some volunteers if that monetary need exists? And I think that one of the other things that we need to be mindful of is the space accessible? Are people who have limited mobility going to be able to be in a particular space that we're doing volunteer work in? Or are there significant physical requirements that may hinder some people from participating? And we really do need to be mindful of the fact that volunteering, like this concept, this idea, is a lot of us said this, it's working for free. It's using our time and our energy and our treasure to provide work for free. And a lot of us are willing to do that, but it's something that we need to think about as we try to engage new volunteers, as we try to find new leaders, as we try to create programs where perhaps our employee resource group members are going into the community and providing volunteer work for other community-based groups. And there's privilege in volunteering. When we are thinking about this idea of giving ourselves freely to something that we're passionate about, that one of the things that we need to do, if we're looking to community-based groups, is ask the question, can you help us understand what's needed here, rather than as a group or as an organization going to your local food pantry and being like, this is what we can offer you. Ask those questions, really understand what the need is as you're thinking about engaging volunteers and creating volunteer programs. I think that it's also important that we think about the socioeconomics of it all. Not everybody is able to work for free. If you're thinking about like a big, volunteer day project, are there stipends that might be available for some participants because you're taking up an afternoon after work or a whole day over the weekend? I also think that as we're thinking about various volunteer programs, whether that is within sort of ERG leadership roles or with these sort of single day events or day of volunteerism, that we offer flexible options. Are there ways that people might be able to participate if they have limitations, they aren't physically capable of participating, or if there are issues with bandwidth, that they're not able to because of other things going on in their lives. They aren't able to be present at that in-person event. Is there an online option? Are there ways that they might be able to donate a small amount of money to support a project or an event? Think about those flexible options for people, and think about all of the ways that you can remove those barriers to participation. If you're thinking about taking your ERG to volunteer with your local food pantry, and one of the barriers for folks is transportation. There's not a bus line that goes there. There's not a way to get there. Think about ways that you as a group can coordinate rides. Think about ways that you can remove any of those barriers. That's non-negotiable when it comes to really creating fantastic volunteer projects. And when it comes to removing those systemic barriers, there's a lot more that we can do. I think that we need to ask questions like, what is the time commitment that we're asking of people? Where do they need to go? Is it going to be safe for everybody in that neighborhood or in that space? I also think we need to be mindful of the fact that there may be language barriers, either for our individual volunteers or for people that are accessing services with community-based organizations that we might be involved in. That's something we need to think about and we need to talk about. We also need to think about any physical requirements that might exclude participants. If you're going to do a day of volunteering, painting in a building for a community-based group, what are those physical requirements? I think that if you're thinking about all day activities and you're thinking about those options where you are, let's say, doing a river cleanup on a Saturday, is food going to be provided? Is childcare going to be provided? We've talked about some of this already. And if you are perhaps going to volunteer with a youth serving organization, are there policies that might limit people from participating? Are there things like background checks that people have to pay for in order to participate? Like, we need to be asking these questions as we think about volunteerism within our networks. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Trevor for just a moment to talk us a little bit more about some of the barriers that you might see within your own companies. And Trevor, you may be on mute. Trevor? Jean Marie?
I am here.
You are here. Are you able to hear Trevor?
I am not able to hear Trevor.
Okay, okay. I don't know if we have lost him and if he will be back or if we will hear from him momentarily. But I think that we will probably keep going, and if he pops back up, we will come back to the slide and let him share some of those corporate barriers that folks might experience. So I do want to be mindful of the fact that we have limited time, and we're working through some tech details, and I appreciate everybody's kindness as we navigate that. But what we're going to do now is talk a little bit about those types of sort of community-based programs that are really going to help to demonstrate impact as you're engaging volunteers and as a way to think about engaging volunteers. Now, did I just hear Trevor join us?
I did. I just joined back. I apologize. My audio went out.
No.
Were you able to cover any of this?
I was not. I said as soon as you came back, we would get back to this slide. So I think that you can take it away.
Sorry. Thank you about that. Yeah, I just wanted to expand a little bit on some of the barriers that might exist from a company perspective. One of those barriers could be engagement restrictions. So the access that folks would have, who's allowed or not allowed to participate in an event. So that could be due to a company policies or legal restrictions that might limit participation only from employees of the company, or restrict contractors, retirees, or family members to participate. It could be due to maybe insurance reasons that are linked to that. So at Dow, contractors used to not be able to formally join employee resource groups due to potential legal reasons, which really restricted our engagement from them. While we encouraged them to attend external events or other things, if they couldn't formally participate, it wasn't fair, and they didn't feel like joining or wanting to volunteer for activities. So our Office of Inclusion actually worked with HR and legal to rewrite our enrollment policies to ensure that Dow employees and contractors could formally sign up and participate in ERG events. Another thing could be dealing with the event location or time that could be limiting. If you have shift workers, for instance, then they may not be able to attend certain events based on location, or they have conflicts on time. If you have events that are located on site, then any external people outside of the company might not be able to join due to access restrictions. So being cognizant of that. You might want to put in virtual options or multiple locations to ensure that folks can make it to the areas that they want to go to. And then other considerations might be restrictions due to working hours, time conflicts, or roles. So some employees might be required to track their time against specific cost centers. And so attending an ERG event or enrolling and volunteering at an event might not be possible because it would conflict against how do they charge it, what do they do. So working with your HR systems to find ways of removing those roadblocks, even if they can't get the support from their leadership to do that, what else can we do? One thing that Dow recently did was expand our total rewards programs to include paid time off for all employees to participate in ERG programs and are volunteering in their community. So it was one way that they could engage and do things without having to take formal time off to do that. And then lastly, leadership support. We all know that an unsupportive leader may make it difficult for some employees to engage or even hurt an employee's career growth if they actively engage in activities, as they're not seen as value added relative to their other primary responsibilities. So things that we've done to help drive that down is, Dow's executive leadership has instilled a strong culture of I&D. We mentioned earlier different ways that we've invested into our people, providing training and mentorship to leaders, showcasing the value, as well as including in I&D metrics within our performance rewards to drive leadership accountability aligned to that. So those are some ways that you can do it. And as ERG leaders yourselves, continuing to drive engagement by showcasing the wins that we mentioned earlier on how ERG engagement can work with employee development and career growth.
Yeah, and I think that is where we get into those places where we are talking about not only demonstrating that individual impact, but also demonstrating community impact. So, I think that that these types of sort of community-led volunteer opportunities where we are going into provide service and hours to organizations, they're a great way to engage new members for your employee and network groups. And they provide you with really effective team building opportunities for your groups. They help to establish your company and your ERG as a resource in your community, and let organizations that you're working with know that they might be able to partner with you on future events. And they introduce your company and the ERG to new audiences, people who might one day bring their talent to your company. Like that's a huge way to demonstrate impact to individuals, to ERG members, and to your companies. And with that, Dow's going to tell us just a little bit more.
Yep. So while there are many benefits to engaging volunteerism, the greatest motivator to activate volunteers, whether it's within a company or a nonprofit, is to align activities to their passions, to their passions. At Dow, we do this by allowing our participants to identify and create their own ways of giving back to the community. So allowing them to determine what ways and they're going to be shaping things and aligning that to your company or organization's strategic goals. This past Pride Month, we led our Share Your Pride campaign that empowered our workforce to find unique ways to give back to their community, regardless if they've done that independently or within group settings, and provided opportunities and examples for things that they could do and how to align those to our corporate goals. So if you want to learn more about these efforts and how we align them to our corporate goals, see Dow's Unequal Summit on Demand workshop on Share Your Pride, aligning Pride Month planning to corporate strategy under the ERG BRGs section, and that's also posted at the top of your chat window. Yeah. So if we go to the next slide, I want to expand on this a little bit more. So while we empowered our workforce to drive engagement, we also have to provide the required support and training to ensure that our local leaders were successful in driving these initiatives. So Dow's Global Citizenship team created an online tool accessible to Dow employees, contractors, as well as externally for friends and alumni that enables volunteers to not only find different opportunities, but submit their ideas so that they can create their own and share those and promote them to others. So it was a centralized tool that folks could sign up and that we could also track volunteering opportunities within the area, understand how big of an impact we're making for our local communities and what types of activities people are engaging in and care about more, which helps us as an ERG know the level of impact that we're having and what people want, what people are driving for, and help shape our goals too for how we work better as an ERG. Additionally, the Global Citizenship team provided on-demand training and support for project leaders to ensure volunteer organizations were well coordinated, well organized, and safe for all those that were involved. This support also ensured that new engagement leaders received the development and encouragement that they needed to help feed our pipeline for future ERG leaders. So someone that's doing this for the first time, steps out of their comfort zone, is growing those skill sets, and these are the people that can now help join and set your strategy and your next engagement activities in future events that you're doing throughout your organization. So if we go to the next slide. Yeah, I also want to say that we have to invest in our people. It's not alone that we're just doing activities. We have to invest in the things that matter most to our people. So in 2019, Dow created the All-In ERG Fund, which provides several grants that our workforce can apply to for supporting community partnership projects that matter most to them. So this further stimulates volunteering activities and ensures that we're capturing what's most important and how we're engaging in our communities, picking the right community partners to drive successful collaborations and volunteering and engagement opportunities. So I'll turn it back over to you to expand.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of interesting to see how some of the projects that we've been working at PFLAG align with the work that you're doing at Dow to support your employee resource groups. Because a couple of years ago, PFLAG National developed a resource called PFLAG Gives Back. And we created basically a guide and a training for PFLAG chapters who were looking to create volunteer opportunities in their communities and make them easy and fun and pretty easy to personalize and replicate, and to think about opportunities that didn't have very high costs for our already volunteer-run organizations. This is a resource that if you're interested in it and you want to learn a little bit more is downloadable on the PFLAG website. It is something that you could use to help sort of craft and develop volunteer-led projects in your community. And it really does, I think, help to give people an understanding immediately of how the work that they're doing is having impact. And we, in this guide, in the PFLAG Gives Back guide, have a number of different ideas for programs like donation drives that would allow you within your companies to collect materials and drop them off. It also provides insight onto sort of considerations that you might need to make, things that like, who's going to drop off the materials when we have collected them? Have we contacted somebody with the organization to be sure that they're expecting us? Are we thinking outside of just the winter holidays when it comes to these kinds of donation drives? We give some insights like that. It also has ideas about on-site volunteer projects. So if you were interested in doing like a day of service with your employee resource group or with members of your company, there are ideas and things that you could potentially do, as well as those additional insights. Thinking about if we're a really big group, are we able to provide some sort of financial compensation to the organization that's going to host us, because it takes a whole day away from one of their employees? It provides those types of things that you need to think about. We also crafted a number of do-it-yourself projects that have really high impact and pretty low cost for organizations. So if you find yourself in a position where you have a room, you have space where you could all come together and you would like to give back to your community, we have a handful of different ways that you could do that. Sort of recipes for no-bake dog treats, ways to write love notes for LGBTQ youth that are accessing services, things that you could do together and create so that you are giving back to the community. And again, there are some insights on how to make this as effective as possible, making sure that it's fun and that you've got snacks and you're playing music as you're doing these do-it-yourself activities. So that's just something that PFLAG has developed and crafted that I think might be helpful for you if you are thinking about either creating or complementing a community-based volunteer program that already exists within your company. And so the next thing that I want to do is talk just a little bit about, in the nearly 50 years that PFLAG has been working with volunteers, sort of the other part of this conversation, because I think that a lot of folks are probably thinking about like, these are great opportunities, and yes, we want to get out in the community, but one of the things that we struggle with is finding people to step up to take on leadership roles within our employee resource groups. And so I want to talk just a little bit about that. And for that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jean Marie for just a second to ask you all a question.
And I was just getting ready to message the both of you. We're getting a lot of questions from people, Jamie and Trevor. So if we can make sure we have some time, there's some excellent questions in the chat. So for everybody who is out there, we would love to know one good reason why someone would want to take on an ERG leadership role. besides being very tired. Transferable professional skills, visibility with senior leaders, leadership experience, career advancement, development. A lot of people are saying visibility and growing your career, exposure, networking, connecting with other colleagues, being able to make change, professional development, developing my communication skills, being a role model, personal pride, passion, getting out of your bubble, being a change agent. My goodness, there are a whole lot of reasons that people want to take on ERG leadership, and we are seeing them in the chat. So thank you, everybody. And I turn it back over to you.
Yeah, and this is Trevor's going to take the lead on this section for us.
Perfect. So yeah, a lot of great reasons why someone's going to want to get into a leadership role. Let's talk a little bit about that, the role of the leader in general. So the key role of the leader, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, are really to align people's passions and skills with the organizational needs, whether that be a nonprofit or corporate. You know, there's a Japanese concept known as ikigai, which means reason for being. And in its simplest form, it means that one finds their life's purpose when they can align what they love and what they're good at with what the world needs and with what one can be rewarded for. So as a business or organizational leader, it is our responsibility to know the latter two and align those with the skills and motivators of our teams. Likewise, as leader, our role is to grow and develop our workforce. So volunteerism, whether within an ERG or externally, is a venue to practice and develop skills that one may not be able to grow in their own activities. So consider motivating your workforce by aligning volunteer opportunities with one employee development plan. And this should also gain support from the direct supervisors, as well as feed that feeling of accomplishment that, again, makes people want to keep going and climb up that ladder and take on different responsibilities. So if we can do both of these right, we should have no trouble finding folks that are willing to step up to the plate. And all that we're left to do is ensure that we enable our passionate teams through a variety of things. One, trust, trusting our teams to deliver on their promises using their skills, experiences, and expertise, as well as transparency, being transparent on our team's goals, our organizational goals, what the expectations are for them and the task at hand, what they're enlisting into, as well as being transparent on the timelines when things need to get done and any potential barriers that they might run into. So we don't want to hide what's going to make this task difficult. We need to have that up front. And then also empowerment, empowering our teams to succeed through mentorship, providing the right resources so that they do get the materials, the people, the connections that they need to get the job done, and then empower them through reward. You know, rewarding them for a job well done, have that positive cycle that's going to keep them going and have that fulfillment to take on new tasks. And finally, one of the biggest things is through accountability, making sure that we ensure that they're accountable to deliver on the agreed upon goals and that they communicate their support needs in a timely fashion, that we're holding them accountable to tell us what their challenges are and allow us to help them navigate through them. And then being transparent on any potential consequences, both positive and negative. You know, leading this is going to allow you to do this, and this is what I'm going to hold myself accountable to do for you in response, or even hold them accountable like, look, if this does not get done, then we're not going to be hitting these targets. We might lose funding, we might lose volunteers, we might lose something else. So all of these things, trust, transparency, accountability, and empowerment, this is what our role is to support and build up our teams and ensure that we're driving that positive alignment as leaders.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when we think about ERG leadership and we think about people taking on leadership roles, that it's really important that we're communicating effectively why people might want to get involved. And all of the things that you mentioned, sort of bringing in new ideas, getting fresh set of eyes on work, making those connections, developing skills. Like those are all the reasons that we should be communicating to people that they might want to get involved in ERG leadership positions. And we need to make sure that leadership is accessible. You know, people are not going to sign up if they don't understand what is going to be expected of them. So let's be willing to communicate what we need from people, what they're signing up for. We need to build strong leadership teams with defined roles that people understand. We also need to be sure that when it comes to those ERG leadership positions, that people know about the work that's happening behind the scenes. They have a sense of what's going on, and that leaders are visual and visible, and are really demonstrating the benefit of membership to everyone who comes to an event, who comes to a meeting, who participates in a volunteer opportunity, that is really being demonstrated. We also, when we're thinking about making leadership something that's accessible, need to ensure wherever and whenever we can that work is being shared and that people see that happening. They see the co-leads asking for support from other leaders in the employee network. They see that happening, and that we are creating opportunities where individuals who are maybe just sort of dipping their toes in the water are able to utilize not only their talents, but also the things that they're most passionate about. I think that oftentimes we make assumptions about how someone might want to be involved, and based on the talents that they have or the role that they have within our organizations, but there might be something else that we're interested in, and we need to manage both of those realities. And I think that it's great for us to think about all of the ways. This is something we've seen PFLAG chapters do really, really well to engage new leaders and sort of onboard people for bigger leadership roles, is thinking about informal leadership positions that are going to meet a variety of needs for your employee resource group, and create that talent pipeline. So, think about whether you're going to have an ally engagement chair or a digital or social media manager, or, think about those ways that you can, again, take advantage of people's talents and their passions to also meet the needs of your employee resource group. And I am going to skip this question to be sure that we have time to get to your questions. But I think that when we talk about the challenges that PFLAG chapters see when it comes to engaging new leaders, that one of the biggest issues that we hear about is people recruiting new leaders, finding people to step up. And I think that there are some really basic things that we sometimes miss. And the first is asking people to step up. A lot of people don't know what's needed, and if we aren't asking them to take on a role or take on a responsibility, they might not know that need even exists. One of the other things that we can do and that we need to do is demonstrate how being involved in leadership and getting involved in planning and coordinating and doing these types of events is that it helps you to create connection, and it's a fun thing to do. We also need to think about ways that we might build recruitment into leadership positions and into the descriptions of those positions, so people know it is a responsibility that they have and something that they will be held accountable for. We need to, again, be sure that we're delegating projects and that not one person is doing all the work, that we're publicizing vacant positions, that we're providing training to new leaders, and that we're saying thank you and we're honoring people's accomplishments and what they've been giving to our organizations. So again, it's going to make it more appealing to people who perhaps have not been involved to date. And if you're still having difficulties, I think there are some really tough questions that you probably need to ask your leadership team, your employee resource leadership team, such as, are you really delegating responsibility? And if not, how are you going to handle that? Are you thinking about titles and job descriptions and responsibilities that are either too rigid or might be overwhelming for new people? Are your job descriptions for something like the code lead of the ERG or the event coordinator, are they too difficult? Are they deterring from people getting involved? Does it seem like too many hours or too many different pieces? Think about that. I also think that if you're having difficulties and you're unable to fill one of your leadership positions, we have to ask the question, like, what's going to happen if nobody fulfills a specific role? For an organization like PFLAG, all of our chapters are required to have a board that includes a president, a secretary, and a treasurer. If we don't fill one of those roles, that's an issue. That is sort of a violation of bylaws. But if we're not going to fill the social media coordinator, that's not nearly as big of an issue. And so I think we need to ask those questions. And I think that we also need to think about all of the ways that we're providing new leaders opportunities to onboard and get trained, and what materials and resources we have for them so that they feel confident in doing the work. And when we think about leadership, I think one of the other things we always have to consider is leadership transition. And in order to ensure that transition goes as smoothly as possible, it's great to create a leadership team that is not dependent on that one single person just doing everything. Because if that's the case, when that person steps away or perhaps leaves the company or goes to a new position or transfers locations, all of the work is then not getting done. I also think that when we think about these leadership roles, it's important from the get-go to set term limits. If you have somebody who's really experiencing a lot of difficulty when it comes to taking a step back as the lead of the employee resource group, or as the president, or as one of the co-leads, it might be a good time to say, well, what if you step back from that role, but you took on the ally engagement coordinator role, or you took on some other leadership position, to let them take a step back, but not leave the group entirely. And I think that, again, when it comes to leadership transition, making sure that we're celebrating and we're thanking outgoing and former leaders with some regularity is a good way to make people feel a little bit more comfortable stepping back. And when it comes to that transition, we've got to think about a plan too. We got to think about some of those things that are going to make that transition easier for new volunteers, and again, sort of more appealing to people who are stepping up for perhaps the first time. So think about how you're going to bring new leaders up to speed, how you're going to connect them with what you've been doing, what you will be doing, and those sorts of things. I think that it's also a good idea for all of us to sort of document literally everything, like write it down if you need to, because we need to think about those things that have to be passed on from one leader to the next. That might be physical things like keys to a storage area where you keep all of your Pride swag, or it might be passing along information for a partner like Jean Marie and me at PFLAG. You have to share that information and pass it along. I think that it's also, when we think about leadership transition, really important to share files and passwords and anything that new leaders might need to be sure that the work is getting done. And I've said this a couple of times, but I think when we're talking about engaging new volunteers and the role that leadership plays, consistently and always saying thank you is going to go a very long way. And with that, we are going to get to comments and questions, but I am going to pull up Trevor and the PFLAG team's contact information, just in case you'd like to get a hold of us. And if you would like to download the PFLAG Gives Back guide that I mentioned, you can go to pflag.org/pflaggivesback. And I'm going to keep this slide up for just a little bit as we get to the first question or two, and then I'll pull it down so you can see more of our beautiful faces.
First of all, everybody is loving this session, Trevor and Jamie. So congratulations on some really, really good content. And thank you everybody for the great comments. So I have 3 questions here, and one came up so many times in a bunch of different forms. And it essentially was, can both of you discuss volunteering virtually? Because so many people are still in a work from home situation. Jamie, I know you and I have had to navigate this. It originally came up by Kevin, and then a bunch of other people brought it up too. And somebody even said right now, the only way to get funding for that, for volunteering, is if it is virtual. So could you both address that?
Yeah,
Sure
Trevor,
thing.
would you
Jamie,
like?
Do you want to start, or do you want me to start from corporate?
I was just about to ask the same question. I can start because I know that one of the things that we have done at PFLAG with our corporate partners is trying to think of really quick and easily digestible volunteer opportunities that are almost, I don't want to say tacked on, but really tacked on to other opportunities. So for example, during Pride Month, there were a couple companies that we worked with that we provided an educational opportunity and then added an additional 15 minutes for people to do a quick and easy volunteer opportunity. And for us, that was, it was like a photo campaign that we did with ally cards and those sorts of things. I think that that is one of the things that we are seeing more and more, that as a part of, let's say, a support group that maybe your ERG is hosting, or an educational opportunity, or a social event, that there are sort of quick and easy things that people can do. The other thing that I know PFLAG chapters have been doing a lot of has to do with advocacy work, which can be a little challenging for a lot of companies, but there are really sort of quick and easy ways to host an hour-long block together where you're calling legislators about a particular issue, or you're all sending emails or writing postcards together, or those sorts of things. So those were two that came to mind really quickly. Trevor, I don't know if you have anything that you wanted to add.
Sure. So as I mentioned, we allowed our folks to help us come up with ideas as well on what we could be doing, especially throughout Pride Month. If you go to that session, you'll see a lot of examples of that. But just in short, a lot of, in the global environment, we had areas and regions where people couldn't get out to do community type things. So the types of activities people were doing were things like volunteering for a help hotline, providing things or helping out in communities that way, or signing up for a board position within a local nonprofit, utilizing their skill sets to do other things for a nonprofit or organization, whether that's if they have a financial background, helping out with the books or driving some of that. If they are educational leaders, helping doing STEM programs or online tutoring. Within maybe it's teaching certain workshops, some of our folks within marketing or that have skills or skills in speaking would go and work with some of these nonprofit organizations to help build up their content, make it better, whether it's online, if there's a digital success or skill sets that they have that align to that, or through teaching them how to be a better orator and speaker. We also had folks that developed online summits that provided LGBT inclusive training for other companies, as well as other communities within their region. And those were some large initiatives that Dow helped fund through the All-In ERG program. And it could be even something as simple as finding ways to make and donate things. We had people that were sewing knitted hats and selling those and donating that money to a local shelter house or something like that, or going out independently within their communities, picking up trash and beautifying the areas around them. So there's plenty of things that you can get creative with, but I think leverage your teams to help identify some of those and share those ideas broadly. So use your people.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you, Trevor. I wanted to add one thing that I forgot about a little bit. One of the companies that we worked with actually wanted to volunteer with PFLAG, and we were able to together come up with a campaign where their employees were creating some digital assets for us because that is the space that they occupied, and that was a really effective campaign. So I wanted to call that out there too. But Jean Marie, you said you had two more questions.
Yes, and I have a feeling these are probably a little bit more Trevor side questions. Mm-hmm. Trevor, there was one question about if you had any experience with getting legal or HR to allow contractors to participate in volunteer projects.
Yeah, we have. So our Dow volunteering web portal is open to all. People can create their own portal, whether they're a friend, an alumni, or other, to be able to participate in some of those external based programs. We did have issues earlier with contractors, as I mentioned, being able to join our organization formally. And we did have to work very closely with legal. It took a few years to learn how we can reshape our contracts to make it such that they could formally sign up. So send me an email. I can get you in touch with someone that was involved in that and can provide more information on the specific language that we had to change in our contract to allow our contractor workforce to formally sign up for the ERGs.
Thank you. And there was another question, and I thought it was an interesting one. And it was, and again, Trevor, I think this is more for you. How do you ensure, or what was the process for Dow to ensure that the community partners that you were picking, so I'm just going to use PFLAG as an example, were aligned with your corporate goals, your philanthropy goals? What sort of does that process look like?
Yeah, so there is a vetting process. We have a team that looks at at our partners that we spend money with, that we invest in, and it's a narrow team. We do have to be very focused on how we spend our money, who we invest in, and make sure that, you know, not just that they're a great organization doing wonderful things, but that their mission, their vision, the things that they're doing also align with us, and making sure that what we're giving, we're also receiving. So for instance, with PFLAG and Dow in our partnership, there's a lot of benefits that we get from being partners with PFLAG, from educational training programs to the type of support that we get through our local areas and engaging with the local PFLAG chapters. And then on a more local level, each of our sites may identify different local nonprofit organizations that they choose to partner with. And those partnerships don't necessarily have to be monetary. We might be doing more engagement with them. So having people join onto their boards, their steering teams, and helping get resources from them, whether it's where's a safe place that I can go to get that's an inclusive doctor if I'm looking for trans medications, or if I'm trying to get mental health services. So we partner closely with some of those nonprofit organizations that have a pulse in the community and can provide that information to our employees.
And I do know that we are at the top of the hour, and lots of folks probably have to head on to their next session. So thank you all so much for being with us. We really appreciate you being a part of PFLAG's first workshop at the summit so far. We will see you next time. Thank you for being here, and have a great rest of your conference.
Thank you all.